Hello, everyone. Welcome to WeWork and our events tonight, Winning the War for Tech Talent. I would like to thank you all of you to be here with us at WeWork 9 QRC and everyone online here. Thank you for coming. First of all, before the night begins, we have just a quick note. We have invited a photographer to record the night for some photos, some filming. So in case you would not like to be filmed, just let us know. Our photographer will try to avoid you in the pictures and the film. So I'm Joyce from WeWork. I'm your host tonight. Welcome again to WeWork. Not sure how many of you have been to WeWork. Can you hands up if you have been to WeWork or you're a member? Good job. You have been to the best place in the world. So this is the place that you're at now is our latest new buildings in Hong Kong. We just opened on February 2022. So this is actually our first event in this building. So thank you for being here. So currently at WeWork, we have 6 buildings in Hong Kong, including New Street in Sang Poon, here in Central, Wildlife Tower in Wan Chai, Lee Garden 1 in Causeway Bay, Tai Kwu Wan Road, and 2 Harbour Square in Kwun Tong. So speaking of that, we would like to invite all of you who haven't never been to WeWork before by offering you, the person who is here today, a free day pass to any of our WeWork Hong Kong buildings. Iris, can you show the slides? It's okay. So, like, for people who is here with us today, make sure you take the attendance because we will send you a redemption voucher by email next week. So you can redeem a 1-day free pass in any of our Hong Kong buildings with this voucher. So my personal favorite is actually Tai Kwu Wan Road and 2 Harbour Square in Kwun Tong because of the amazing sea view there. But in case you're looking for the best community vibe, go to my building in Wan Chai. I will serve you a drink and have fun together. So make sure you take the attendance tonight and we can send you the email with the voucher. So, and also you might have aware that we have an amazing wine sponsor tonight. Thank you, My Eye Cellar, one of our members at WeWork, for sponsoring the wonderful wine for tonight. So if you haven't grabbed a drink, just feel free to grab a drink for yourself. And also they're very kind to offer 2 bottles of wine for the lucky draw. So again, if you haven't dropped your name card over there, please do so and make sure you win the chance to like 2 beautiful wine bottles. So for now, I would like to invite our guest speaker to the stage and pass them the time to introduce themselves. Please. Derek, I'll pass the time to you.
Thank you, Joyce. Yeah, first of all, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I think it's really amazing to have all of you here. People is the #1 issue for all the companies. If you had read the book from Ben Horowitz, which is the A16Z co-founder, he make it very clear. Take care of the people, product, profit in that order. Unfortunately, in Hong Kong, there's a talent crunch. It's very challenging for people to look for the right talent, especially when you're working in international markets. Hong Kong is only a city with 7 million people. And if you're looking at Southeast Asia, there's 500 million people. If you're tackling EU, US, China, well, the problem is even worse. So it makes sense that we don't have enough people in Hong Kong. Before we start going to the discussion, I just want to appreciate WeWork and My Asset again. I haven't been to a hybrid event for a long time, so it's really amazing to connect everyone here. I'm very glad that today we have 3 panelists here. We have Louis from Choco Up. We have Crystal from SleekFlow. We have Jeremy from Mainstay Asia. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I think let's give a warm welcome to all our panelists, shall we? Cool. I will start with Germany. I know you have more than a decade of experience working for clients to help them to look for talent. I'm just curious to hear. It would be great if you can introduce yourself a little bit with your own background and your company, And especially, I'm very interested to hear that in the last 3 years, what are the challenges that people have faced in COVID, and especially how things have changed in the last 10 years.
Last 10 years. Wow, it's making me sound really old. Yeah, so I'm Jeremy, as we've already said. I'm one of the directors for Mainstay Asia, and we are a recruitment and consulting business that specifically focus on technology and business transformation. You're going to have to on the questions, Derek, because there are quite a few. So I guess what has Hong Kong looked like over the last 3 years? I think it's a really exciting time. When I came to Hong Kong from the Middle East, so prior to here, I spent 5 years in Dubai, and that was a city that was quite, aggressively trying to accelerate its smart city status and technology footprint in the world. And I was actually quite surprised when I came to Hong Kong how undigital a lot of the aspects of the city were, just still prominent in lots of places where, I was going to places I couldn't pay on card, for example, and Apple Pay, Alipay, these types of things. And for me, it seemed like quite an interesting place, which was ripe for transformation and digitizing and offering new products and, the gateway, what it is to China from the rest of the world. So that was what excited me to begin with, looking at the opportunity, because there's so much that has changed over the last 3 years, and it's continuing to accelerate. And I think with looking at that and how enterprises are driving things from the large scale perspective, and some of the incredibly exciting startups and SMEs you have driving really interesting products and innovation, it's a real good combination of the two. But with that has become some significant challenges around people. And with the demand growing in Hong Kong over the last 3 years, we've unfortunately gone through an experience where the population has essentially shrank. We've had people who have left. The demand has grown and the talent has shrank, and that's created some significant problems for businesses, and things we've had to look at as a partner of these businesses to provide advice and support on best ways to attract people and to retain people as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I definitely at Glint also feel that some enterprises are changing their strategy with all the new business demand, and also the fact that Hong Kong has some macro change there, actually making a lot of opportunity for everyone. Yeah, thank you, Jeremy, for that. Yeah. And next, we have Crystal from SleekFlow. I know that you are the number 4 employee at SleekFlow. I'm just curious to hear that at the beginning of SleekFlow, how did you guys think about talent crunch? Yeah.
Right. So hi guys, I'm Crystal from SleekFlow. So SleekFlow is a social commerce platform. You combine us with platform, and we have marketing automations and all of cool things that you can do to sell, service, and do marketing better. But yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm actually SleekFlow. So that was back in 2020, and now we have almost 60 people at SleekFlow. So yeah, we're growing pretty quickly. So I think talent crunch was something that was always on our mind. Back when I joined, so we only had the founder, 2 developers, and me. And that's when we knew that, hey, this is not going to work. We're going to need a lot more people or a lot more content and stuff like that. So what we did was we actually had a roadmap planned out. What kind of product do we want by what date? How many people do we need to hire? And that's why we actually got in touch with Glint like down the road, because we knew that hiring in Hong Kong alone is not enough. So we hired our development team to Glint. So yeah, apart from that, we expand. So actually, we expanded to Singapore last year. We opened our office there. We opened up in UK this year. So we've been hiring remotely. We've never been. We've been, but like since the pandemic, we haven't been. So yeah, so we actually managed to hire people there as well. So I think it's been a whole challenge for us as a team, as a company. But I think we all know that growth is very important at this very stage, as well as the talent crunch that's happening everywhere. So yeah, we're looking forward to tell you how we did it in more detail later.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal, especially for mentioning how we support you growth. I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And last but not least, we have Louis here. Louis, I know that you actually have co-founded 2 companies before, and now you're working on new product to help companies to fundraise. We'd love to hear from your experience in building a tech team. How did you tackle that in the last few years?
Thank you. Also, yeah, this is Louis. I'm from Choco Up. Actually, I'm working for the product and tech team and develop the product as a fintech platform. So what Choco Up does is we are actually a financing platform. We're providing a new innovative financing solution called revenue-based financing to help digital native startups business to grow and also to help them expand globally. So yes, as Derek mentioned, I before I joined this company, actually I found 2 startups before. So in total, I've been spending like around 7-8 years, of startup, in my life in Hong Kong. So actually, I experienced like a few changes, like actually since 2016. Because like back in that days, like hiring tech people is hard. It's not that hard because like we don't have large enterprise to compete with you. We don't have so many innovative startups to compete with you. So you can just ask around your friends, and you can always find talent, right? So the second second startup I actually found was like from 2018. Back in that days, it's already very hard, to hire tech talents in Hong Kong. And luckily, at that time, our business actually covered, a major presence in Taiwan. So at that time, we started to build a team in Hong Kong and Taiwan. But in the end, our Taiwan team, just become like 10, 20, and Hong Kong team just like doesn't grow at all. So it's interesting, that's the first experience that we finally understand that, hey, we need to scale, and we need to scale our team like globally, like not only limit to Hong Kong. And at Choco Up, actually in day one, we are a regional business. We have offices in Singapore. Our CEO is sitting there. Our COO is in Hong Kong. Like even though we are founded in Hong Kong, so originally we are a global business. And we actually build our teams like firstly we tried very hard to hire talents in Hong Kong, and afterwards we know that it's not never make it to scale. And we started to hire people in Singapore as well, and also Taiwan. And a few months ago, we partnered with Glint. They actually help us to source very, very good talent in Vietnam and also Indonesia. And that's how we see the changes. And that is the thing, even we are the fintech, we believe that we are the easiest one to get talent. We still find it so hard. For all kinds of like tech companies, different kind of startups, it's just like no way, to only hire in Hong Kong.
Yeah, thank you, Louis, for sharing the experience. Like, it's interesting to hear that you actually started with the Hong Kong office engineering as an office, and you try to grow to Taiwan office, and organically that just outgrown the original office. I think the sign that is as a market reality. Yeah, cool. So before we move to the discussion today, I do want to share a little bit more about remote hiring with my experience at Glint. So I'm Derek Choi. I'm the General Manager of Managed Talent at Glint. Our mission is to help employers to look for the right talent within Southeast Asia, regardless of the border. When Glint started 10 years ago, we only focus on local hiring. But then soon we realized that a lot of companies want to do remote hiring, but they did not have the resources to hire and manage remote workers. And that is how the Managed Talent was born 10 years ago, and now developed as an end-to-end solution of offshore hiring. And right now we got more than 1,000 people in the region of Indonesia, Vietnam, and also Taiwan. Just to give some data on like what's the market situation. With the 1,000 people within our Managed Talent service, more than half of them are engineers. It's just a reality that when people try to hire remotely, they will opt for tech first. And we can actually talk about this in our discussion later on. Why is that the case? And in terms of the salary, which is like what people concerned about when it comes to hiring, is objectively true that when you try to hire someone from Taiwan, it's about on average 25% lower than the salary that you need to pay in Hong Kong. Well, this is a benefit for the employers, but in terms of quality, well, I know there's a conflict of interest, but I do work with engineers from both Indonesia and also Taiwan. My experience is amazing. I will let Louis and also Crystal to share more of their experience working with engineers across the world. Yeah, cool. Without further ado, I think let's go to the key discussion tonight. The first question I have tonight is, why are we seeing a sentiment that Hong Kong is experiencing a severity of talent crunch in recent years? Probably I will start with Germany first, because I think you have a lot of exposure to clients. We'd love to hear from you as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was one of the things I spoke about, in the first comments I made. The fact is more and more people are looking and needing to hire tech talent, and a big chunk of the market is either looked to exit or has already exited. And I think we were at a point from the analysis we did that 20% of the candidates that we were working with were either looking to or had already exited within technology. And because they've got sought after skill sets, they knew they'd be able to go to other locations that weren't being as affected by COVID as much, or you know, other things that have been going on. And that's something that's really driven, you know, the challenges we've got here. The excitement of the fact that Hong Kong is transforming and it's digitizing and it's innovating a lot more. That's created the challenge of the fact that the catch up hasn't been there, I don't think, from what the government are doing to support the universities and driving the talent through from the kind of the education level coming up into what's coming out from you know, the back end for people entering new careers.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I love Hong Kong as a city, but I think it's reality that I think recent survey has indicated that I think more than 70,000 people are actually moving out of Hong Kong. I mean, that's actually aligned with like what Jeremy said about like a lot of people are actually relocating out of Hong Kong. I do want to like check with maybe Lewis, like how do you see that? I think you have a strong experience working on that, but I'm just curious to hear a bit more from you on this talent crunch issue in Hong Kong.
Sure. But actually we have a lot of like painful experience. So you know, actually I think there are multiple factors and you know that drive you know the talent crunch in Hong Kong. I think the first one I can think of is like at the time when we are hiring, you know, that was the boom of you know the fintech company like crypto, virtual banking, and other fintech like insurtech, etc. So you know, those kind of companies like by nature they have much more like you know well funded. Okay, then they have a lot of like you know markup you know to fight for talents in this market. And also another thing is about you know the COVID boom. And also, you know, a lot of the traditional business, like they haven't thought about, you know, digital transformation. And after the COVID, like, you know, since 2020 and then 2021, they finally believe that, you know, they need to, you know, digitalize. And that also increased the competition, you know, in Hong Kong for this tech talents. And another factor I believe is also, you know, about the immigration issues, right? You know, a lot of like tech people, you know, they're programming, their language is not limited to English, Chinese. You know, they do programming like, you know, JavaScript, you know, Java, etc. So they can go to anywhere, communicate with any companies like in the world. So that's why, you know, a lot of those people, they're the easiest one to move out of Hong Kong. Yeah, I think that's like, you know, factors I think is affecting.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure everyone use the banking right nowadays, and you can see how many banks are actually updating their app. Not to mention about insurance company. It's actually what Glint do. We serve a lot of like an insurance company, banks, and we are witnessing this trend that they're not just looking for outsourcing. They actually want to build their own internal team to accelerate the transformation. So definitely I can understand why there's like more and more demand for the tech talent. Yeah, finally, I do want to like check with Crystal on the question on the on this talent crunch, because I also understand that you mentioned just now you have this plan even 3 years ago, which I think that naturally go to the next question. Is like how you actually think about all this planning and how this actually affect your business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very important to take in consideration. And the next thing is also depending on the vision and the way you're going to scale. That's when you need to start planning these kind of things. Very interestingly, actually, I had this conversation with my founder yesterday because I saw this video online and there was a Series A company, and then they were saying, like, oh, we have about 20 employees. And I sent them like, okay, we just reached Series A, we have 60. Are we a bit too big? And they told me like, hey, but think about it, you know, the moment we raise now, we have to get our product ready for the next round of raise to make sure here now so that we are equipped to understand the product well enough to execute. So I think what we do actually is we start planning maybe 6 months to a year ahead in terms of our hiring pipeline. So that's what we do here. And I think what you mentioned about talent crunch is quite true as well. Like you said, like, well, Hong Kong has 7 million people. That's like not a lot. And then where I'm from Singapore, we have 4 million people. So, you know, so Hong Kong's really a lot compared to Singapore. But then I think what we are always looking for is like, hey, we need more of the same people that can do things at different and execute in different ways. So like what you mentioned, like, oh, maybe in Taiwan, the prices for a maybe developer is different from Hong Kong. So that's why we actually did that as well. We actually used Glint to get to our Taiwan team. And we also are trying to see which parts of the different locales we're in that we can scale faster. So, in UK, salaries are definitely higher. In Singapore, salaries are comparable to Hong Kong, but then there's a lot more to pay in terms of CPF, which is the sixth version of MPF in Hong Kong. So yeah, I think there's lots of different considerations that we look at. Even our Malaysian team, our Malaysian team is very efficient in terms of like salary to maybe ROI. But yeah, I think that's a lot of things that we look at.
Definitely the prioritization of like different team would be helpful. Just to share, like even in Glints, I think our people team always fail the hiring target. They're always a target that we need to hire like 100 engineers. After the quarter, only half of them are filled. I think it's true for almost all the startup. I would like to ask about Louis about this question as well. Like, how have you been hiring people and how does plan work in reality?
Well, yeah, I think, yeah, everyone doesn't like the talent crunch, right? So we want the good people in the market, but the reality is like we have to face this issue. And when let's talk about this current startup is like a fintech company, right? So we actually do build a product from different stages. Like firstly, like we do the MVP. We try to prove the concept and quick iterations. And but if we want to build this, we really need core engineer. We can easily communicate, and they know how to build products. Like not only like being a vendor, to finish a project, that kind of things. So in the beginning, it's very hard to find. I rather find a very good talent that takes longer time instead of finding someone that I compromise on quality. So the first few batch of the engineers, I probably think is most important. And then once we continuously build a product, and then we really need to scale the team, right? Because like we can't have only like 2-3 people building the whole thing. We need to maintenance. Whenever you roll out a new product, you need more manpower to maintain it, and then you continuously do R&D and build new products. So as we grow, we have to think about okay, probably building here in Hong Kong is good for communication. That could be save you more time in that kind of like communication cost. But it will actually limit your development. For example, our business grows so fast, we have requirements from different functional team, but the product and tech have to catch up. So this is like what I think the talent crunch is really affecting, and we have to respond to this change like in different innovative ways.
Yeah, I'm just curious to hear more about like the MVP and different stages, like because I definitely understand that you have your roadmap, you have your fundraising targets, and you need to like responsible to the investor. And when you are not able to hire fast enough, what would you usually do?
Well, we need to motivate people, right? Yeah, I think all kinds of startup, I believe like SleekFlow, Jeremy, the companies like we are always limited by resources. Like we don't have enough people to do everything, even though we are growing, because our growth can only be faster, right? So I think motivating your team, providing a better culture for them, and providing a growth environment for them is also essential. And the ownership is also important, because for people who build product, they don't probably understand so well about commercials, but the only thing that impact them the most will be the sense of like success, right? If you can give them the ownership, they build something that is impactful, I think that would be more important.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, the growth of the company is always about two metrics: how many people you acquire, how many you can retain. So I think Louis made a very good point on the retention of the great talent. If you can actually retain the best talent, that is A players, that will always attract more A players. I do want to like move on to the next question with Jeremy on this remote hiring. This may be new to some of the clients. I'm just here to hear that when now we talk about remote hiring after COVID, what does Borderless mean to you, and how does that mean to your clients?
I had an interesting experience with working Borderless for the first 3 months this year, because I traveled home to the UK and got stuck. So I had a very good experience of that personally. So I could empathize with some of the people and the clients that we were working with had. What does Borderless mean to me? Well, it meant exactly that from my experience, was being able to effectively do my job from a remote location. And I think we're very fortunate that this happened now, where we do have Teams and Zoom and FaceTime and these types of things to be able to support the communications perspective. And I think the most important part, I think, when you're thinking about working borderless is communications, because that's the one thing you lose when you don't have the FaceTime with people. You're saying yourself, Derek, around, do you want to grab coffee? Those types of conversations that might where some great work is done, a great conversation is had, and you do lose things, I think, if you don't have that same level of communication. And I think people need to work a lot harder when you're in a borderless way around being able to engage with people, take into consideration people's mental health if they're working from home constantly and alone, and if they're spending time around enough beings to keep themselves engaged and that type of thing. So I think the communications aspect becomes huge. And I think as leaders of businesses, you need to look at what is our communication strategy with engaging with our borderless talent. How engaged do they feel? We're offering them the chance to give feedback on what the experience is like for them, and how it can be improved. But for me, that's the biggest part of it. I mean, ultimately, hardware can be posted. Things are being hosted in the cloud. That the technology aspect of it's there. It's the communication side of it where things tend to drop off, and that's where people need to hold themselves accountable for.
Yeah, definitely. The technology change in recently has helped us to communicate better, regardless of the border. I'm just curious to hear that when you talk with your clients, how do they see the benefit of the remote hiring of Borderless? I'm just curious to hear from you.
Yeah. So we've done something, or we've ignited something very similar to what Glint's are doing. So we have our technology and transformation delivery center in Manila, in the Philippines, where we're starting to offer an outsourced solution as well to some of our customers. And it's been something in the past where people just categorically said no to. It was a no. It wouldn't work. People wouldn't feel like they're part of the culture. They're not part of the business and the vision and that type of thing. And I think what we've been able to do with people is talk about a small scale solution to begin with, rather than promising, okay, you need a team of 10, we'll put you 10 engineers on the ground to do this. It's about starting somewhere small, piloting something to make sure it works, make sure the onboarding is a smooth experience for them, the fact that person still feels part of the team, and then how that person gets engaged with a business from a remote point of view. And that's something that we've been driving, similar to Glint. It's not on the same scale and very specific to the types of programs that we work around with our customers. But people have realized now, A, it's costing you less money to be able to do it abroad, and B, you can actually find the talent and get them in quicker. And that's the big thing. I think sometimes a hiring process, just for the availability of talent, can take a long time. And that then, the longer something goes on in process, the much more chance you've got of losing somebody to other opportunities and that type of thing. So there's been much more openness to it from not just a small and SME perspective, big enterprise businesses who historically have just given a flat out no, and now starting to be open to it because they realize the challenges.
Yeah, definitely thank you, Jeremy, for bringing this up. Apart from the salary, I think the latency in hiring is definitely one of the things that all the recruitment companies will do. When you look for engineers in Hong Kong, that may take you 18 months. I don't know. Sometimes it's really that bad for senior hiring. But for junior hiring, that also take you 12 weeks. Then can you wait for that? It's already a quarter already. Cool. And I want to ask Crystal, from your experience, when you work remotely, what are the things that you didn't expect before? What are the magic moment that, oh, this is so great for you?
Of working, I think it's about having ownership of your time, and maybe to a certain extent also having lesser people look for you. Because I think when you're in the office, it's just always, hey, can I ask you a quick question? When everyone asks you a quick question, they all add up, and then it becomes an hour long. So I think working remotely, this happened to me when I actually went over to Singapore to start up our office there last year. So I actually went there, and then we actually had me and our first Singapore hire, our Singapore country manager. So we're just two people working very quietly, very efficiently. And I was like, wow, I haven't felt this way in a very, very long time. So that's one of the things that I think is good for having remote working. Another thing I thought was pretty interesting as well is that sometimes, it also enables us to have a bit more of a global perspective in terms of communication. I think it helps us improve communication skills as well. So for example, our Hong Kong team's Mandarin has improved drastically since hiring our Taiwanese team, because they've been talking to them in Taiwan in Chinese. And then the Taiwanese team has picked up some Hong Kong Cantonese slang as well. So I think that's very interesting, very helpful for team building as well. And I think just now you mentioned that I was like the fourth person, right? But technically, I'm actually the fifth person because we actually hired the fourth person remotely. So this fourth person was joined the team in like 2019, and he finally reached Hong Kong this week. So it's a very long journey, but yeah, they do end up in with Hong Kong with us anyway. So I think it's very interesting that this whole borderless, it's just taking the first step and being willing to try. And then it can just bring a lot of different kind of like things that you never ever thought of. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal, for that, like, to sharing the experience. Actually, that would naturally get to the next questions. I'm curious to hear that as both manager who need to do the hiring and also as part of the team member, is that a concern that you see from the team, or people actually embrace that? Oh, Crystal, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. So for me, I think but I think it really depends from person. So for me, I think because I was in the company so early, my job scope changed pretty regularly. Every 3 months, I was in different. So yeah, so I was number like in Hong Kong business before, but then the next marketing person that came in was number 9, and that was more than 1.5 years. So that's where I began doing marketing all alone. So when I started to be able to like hire people, I was very enthusiastic about that. But I think for the tech team, it's a different story because we were growing so quickly. So between number 4 to number 9, a few like tech people because the product was growing so fast. So I think what we needed was actually to have a system in place because we can't always have people who need to build, but people who also need to interview at the same time because it's a very, very tiring process. Interview, shortlist, and back then we didn't have an HR person. So it's like, hey, I need to do the LinkedIn outreach, I need to talk to this person, and I need to choose whether I want to hire this person. So that's a very, very long process. And I think like it's not very efficient in that sense. But for me now, I think like now I'm in a whole new role now, I'm in partnerships. So yeah, we're actually hiring overseas now as well. So I think it's, for me, I like it because I enjoy talking to different people. I enjoy learning more about the culture and think about how make SleekFlow work in this country. That's
I'm curious to hear one more thing about how your boss see this, because I think if you read the news about Elon Musk, I think he's forcing people to go to better office, right? So I'm just curious, like, how does your office like react to that in terms of like the management and also like people on the ground? Yeah.
I think to a large extent, my boss has been quite flexible about it. So yeah, so actually earlier this year, last year we actually had a 4-day work from home policy, and that got scraped earlier this year. So earlier this year became a work from home as many times as you want policy. Earlier this week, I think because the team was just growing so quickly, we had people onboarding almost every 2 weeks. So I think we needed a bit more in-office time to just talk to everyone and keep teamwork strong. So we changed it to 3 days a week as of yesterday. Again, just lots of things happened yesterday, but yeah, as of yesterday. And then, so I think it's good. Yeah, we get to pick our own 3 days. So I think that's good, at least that we know who's going to be in office when, which times I can be here. I think it's a collaboration more.
You have a experience in like game for a long time. I'm actually more interested to hear like how have your strategy has changed in the last few years?
Well, yeah, I think maybe I start with my first experience, hiring remotely in Taiwan when our head office in Hong Kong. At that time, it was like, it was even before COVID happened. So, it's not that common, when hiring remotely. But we did have concerns because like, the founders are not that countries that you don't physically, be able to have a quick chat with them. And then, in the beginning, the strategy is like, we every month. So I would spend my 1 or 2 weeks there, to build a relationship, bonding there, to build a culture there. And yeah, that's how we, first we need to build a good current team there. And afterwards, like COVID hit, and then I actually worked remotely with my team in Taiwan for more than like 1 year. So that was actually a challenge. But at that time, so we changed the strategy. We let Taiwan people, team to work from home as well. So everybody is working from home. It literally makes the whole team remote. And in that case, we actually build another, culture. We have built a lot of a communication mechanism. We appreciate over communication rather than being so efficient. And currently, we also experience some problems which Crystal has mentioned. Our team is growing so fast. Like every almost 1 or 2 weeks, right? We have new members coming to the office and coming to different offices, and we have to switch a little bit because now the COVID we leave a little bit, and then we encourage people to come back to office. Of course, we also provide a flex work. You can choose to work from home for 1 or 2 days, but not as like 3 days that much. But I think it's important, when you grow fast, build a good bonding, talk to more people, and then build a good communication culture. And after all, if you have that culture like established, probably you can do more, like expand this to a overseas team, a remote team.
Definitely, I can see like how this hybrid remote is going to be a great conversation for every company. And I actually just want to add something how teams see this remote hiring with my own talking with clients. I think one of the trigger for most of the enterprise that we see that is the diversity of their management team. I cannot share the names of client, but then it's interesting to see when there's a Indonesian skill coming in to a big bank, how they actually change their hiring strategy very, very quickly. I think the fact that like people may have this misunderstanding or maybe potential bias on like quality of their engineers is always an issue before. But right now, I think with COVID, I think that just opened up the whole new world for everyone. So I think in the future, I think people will embrace this forward hiring definitely for the case. We move to the next, and I think it's the final question, right? Let me check. Oh, yes. I think this is a question that Jeremy first, because we need to talk to the client and see like, how they can actually utilize the opportunity. So the question here is like, where does business look in capitalize this like opportunity and get the crunch fast and effectively? Yeah.
I think the first thing they need to do is look internally. A business is going to go a much further way of attracting people. And Crystal said it earlier on, is having a vision. We went through an exercise ourselves, actually. We read a book called Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0 by Jim Collins, and that kind of took us on a bit of a journey ourselves on what we were looking to achieve. And we created, new values for the business. We were much more in line to what we believed. It created a vision. And, when we hire people, we sell that vision as a part of, what it's like to work for the business. So it's not just a job, you are driving towards building something for the business, and that helps you in your career. And that's one of the things I think businesses and business owners need to look at themselves. And to be honest, I think most startups genuinely are very good at this, of having a vision, because they're wanting to build something to solve a problem and offer something which is an interesting service. That needs to be the first thing on what is the value proposition for your company. I think the second thing is when you are actually interviewing, how skilled and experienced are the people that are conducting the interview, how well they're able to assess and also present a balanced value proposition of the company. I think a very bad experience that some people will have is if they get sold the dream of a company in a role and they hear all the good things and don't hear about any of the challenges. And I think the interview process itself needs to have a level of balance to it when you're presenting your company and your opportunity, because you need to talk about the good and you need to talk about the challenges along with it as well. So when somebody does come into your business, they're not coming into surprises. They've had a clear interview and onboarding process where they know what they're expecting. They've met some key stakeholders, and they understand the value proposition to a good point, and the mission and the vision of the business. I think that's a real big part of it. And you've already mentioned having a good roadmap. I think what businesses probably need to do when you're building a roadmap, especially around hiring, is to take into consideration turnover. So for example, if in your roadmap is in the next 12 months, you need to hire 10 people, you probably need to say we're going to have to hire 12 or maybe 13 to take into consideration turnover of staff and that type of thing. You can look at your own analytics and thinking, what is your turnover? But the bigger a business gets, normally that rate increases, and that's something that companies need to look at as well. And I think you need to be very pragmatic. I think businesses need to be pragmatic around the type of talent they're going to be able to attract pending the value proposition they can offer, the salary they're able to offer and the benefits, the location. If you're in Science Park and you're not offering any remote working, you're going to have a much bigger challenge, and things like that. So I think looking internally is a real big part of it, and also getting an understanding of maybe your competitors, and looking at your competitors and thinking, okay, well, what are they doing well? Are they doing things better than us? Can you look at the types of things they're doing to learn and improve, and get a much better understanding of who you're competing against in the market? And then obviously, as Glints are doing and as we've started to do as well, is to look at locations where the availability of talent is more available, and you have opportunities where communication is important, and you go into countries and nationalities where you have a good line of communication. You're using somebody that's on a relative time zone to you, and having a system in place where you're able to assess people and onboard them so they're feeling like they're part of the team in the business and not feeling like a satellite.
It's interesting to hear that the time crunch is a reality, but there's a lot of things company can do to address the issue. I think one thing that I will echo with Graham is on the interview stage. I think things also have to, and that's why actually we start to work on the EMPS, and also one of the things we do internally is interview training. We actually need to train how to interview in a way to convey the right message, because there are people that are just not a good fit. But if you get them in the house, you have more problem than the benefit that you want to get. So I think the very first thing is to be better in how to interview, make it as a very attractive process to tell the candidate that it's not just a dream, it's a reality, balance the reality with the dreams. I think that actually matters a lot. And I'd love to ask this question to other. Yeah, with 60 people in office, how are you capitalizing the talent now?
Right. So I think I agree with Jeremy a lot. I think location and retaining talent is very important. We're actually in Cyberport, so maybe that explains our flexible work policy. So yeah, to some extent that is it. But then I think capitalizing on talent is a very, very important feature for retaining talent. I think especially when your product is so kind of complex or covers so many areas, I think it's easier to actually retain your talent than to employ new people to get them up to speed and then push it out again. So I think that's one thing. And the next thing is, apart from retaining talent, if your talent and your team is feeling motivated enough, they'll get their friends in. So that again, is a very good and very efficient way on overcoming the crunch, because they're bringing people into the stream as well, and they know that they have the ability as well. So I think that's one thing that we are also looking very heavily at. So example, maybe for me actually, our Singapore office, we're currently staffed with all my friends. So yeah, we all went to school together. We all went to university together. And so they actually came from really good companies. They came from places like Salesforce and all these kind of places. And they're actually helping us run our Singapore team. For example, our Hong Kong dev team as well. Our Hong Kong dev team's also mainly driven in by referrals. So yeah, I think it's very, very important to focus on actually maybe capitalizing on your in-house talent and making everyone strong and happy and motivated. And then the other things will kind of come along, hopefully. Yeah.
Referral is one of the best strategy. I think there's a lot of research saying that if you can get people from referral, I mean the chance of success and also the speed of hiring is much higher. And last but not least, so let's hear from Louis on your experience on capitalizing talent.
Well, yeah, actually, I agree very much about whatever everybody's talking about retention. I think, I recently talked with my friend, as a recruiter company, right? They actually advise even, a recruiter company advised me, hey, you should invest more in retention rather than hiring. Because the money you spend on retention is much, much cheaper than you hiring aggressively, even using your internal resources. So I think retention is important, and the way of doing retention is also important, because when a startup grows, we probably need the skill set, need the right skill set of people to quickly build something, to build a business, build a product. And at that time, probably, some startups, we may ignore, the cultural things, right? So as Darryl mentioned, if we had some people that's not fit, right, probably the problem they brought in is much bigger than the values, they create. So I think, having that mindset, the interview process is really important. In the old days, in the early stage, we probably interview, mostly on the technical side. And now actually we spend 60-70% of interview questions on the personalities and the cultural fit, and the mission and values fit. That's actually very, very important, when you grow fast. So what I think is to capitalize talent, you have different ways. Make quick decision. If you find someone unfit, make quick decision. Don't, keep them there, make a negative impact. And if you find a new talent, make sure the interview process is checking the right, personality and company fit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely this, how to retain people is definitely a quick way of invest your capital. I mean, in terms of getting the talent you need in order to build your product. After the 10 to 8, then I would like to actually move on to the Q&A. Now I would like to open the floor for questions. And if you can produce yourself. Because they are moonlighting. Definitely you will see. And our intention is to help our employer to catch that as early as possible. Rather than waiting for 1 year to know that, oh, someone is moonlighting, not contributing, oh, I should fire that. We will catch it within a quarter. That is basically our solution in terms of both setting physical constraint, and also support the performance management. People face?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that we spend a lot of time on when we're working with people and putting them into roles, whether it's remote or or in physical roles in Hong Kong, is the big part of it. I think first of all starts with building a relationship with somebody. The things that we have to do and make sure we do to a very high standard is build a relationship and a rapport with the talent that we're working with, because ultimately they represent us as a business, and what they do and how they deliver impacts our reputation in the market. And the things that we were always very impendent on is working with people with a level of honesty and integrity, and being 100% honest with them around how we expect what our expectations are with them, and talking about what the standards and the expectations are in return for that. I think that's the first part of it, because ultimately you need to make sure you're working with somebody you've got a good relationship with, and off the back of that you form trust. That's part one. And I think the second thing is ultimately, if we're working with a client and we're putting a consultant on site with them, the big questions we'll ask are, what are the metrics that the business has to be able to assess performance? You know, is it fit for purpose? Do you have a set of metrics you're able to sit there and assess somebody's performance and know if they're performing, what good looks like in that role? And ultimately, you'll have a very good viewpoint if you've got a good level of a way to assess somebody if they're doing a good job. And if they're doing a good job, you can probably sit there quite comfortably and know that they're not spending time on something else. If they aren't adhering or they're not hitting the expectations and the levels that you expect from them, then it becomes a conversation around performance and how do you manage that. And I think it has to come from a human perspective always. You know, the kind of the level of trust you have with somebody and the integrity you treat them with and what you expect from them.
Cool. I know Joy's already saying we're almost time. So I want to take the opportunity to like appreciate.
We might have one more question.
Cool, amazing. Let's go ahead.
Hi. So just to give you some context, I come from a product background and I built products in the past and I've worked with hardware as well as software. And I understand that one of the questions that you asked, which was about Elon Musk's sort of values about working in like coming to the office and whatnot. The thing is, when you work in hardware, you've got to test, you've got to do all that. So being in-house, to be in that sort of environment, it is very, very important to be there. There's no way of setting up an, what do you call it, an remote environment for that sort of business. Then again, you've got software businesses that are capable of having that sort of remote sort of experience. However, in Hong Kong specifically, having that sort of remote sort of experience, working with global teams, communication, like what you said, is very important. But what I realized being in the product space and working with talent in Hong Kong, it's very executional, all right? Whereas in Singapore, you've got talent that's end-to-end because they're better businesses in Singapore. I've mapped out the entire market, and that's because they're better internet companies in Singapore. So you've got product managers that are end-to-end, both strategic as well as executional. So is there a way where talent could be sort of groomed in Hong Kong? How do you influence that? How do you promote that? How would you guys do it? How do you take the initiative to do it, to promote that in terms of, because it comes down to the top level, and that's the government sort of level. And that's why talent's absolute, sorry, excuse my French, but there's not much talent out here for product.
I think the question here is how can we support local talent in getting a job? Is that the right question? Okay.
How do you support, how do you attract businesses in Hong Kong, big businesses in Hong Kong, like let's say, for example, the Facebooks, the Googles, that actually will bring on product teams? Because we're a very product-centric sort of society in Hong Kong, and we don't have product teams here because the product teams are based in Singapore. We have a manufacturing hub right next door, but yet the product teams are based in Singapore and all that. I don't get that, you know, like how, like it comes down to a government sort of thing where they have to take the initiative to do that. How do you promote that? Because otherwise Hong Kong's a dying sort of, you know, a dying region.
Yeah, this question definitely talk about that. Your whole company or in Hong Kong, I'm pretty sure you have a lot on this topic.
Yeah, actually, thank you. I think that's a great question. Like this is also the question in my mind like all the time. I'm a product person. I started my own startup, build my own product, and now I'm working for another fintech startup, to build product. So, it's time for me to hire product manager. And my first product manager is not from Hong Kong, sadly. I actually hired them from Taiwan, and she's relocating to Singapore. And this tells a fact that, in Hong Kong, we hardly find good product person. And the reason I may summarize it from my personal experience is, tech talents, in Hong Kong, originally, they're not a product person. Like we have a lot of vendors, SI, they are doing projects, helping big enterprise, it's kind of like outsourcing labor force. So what they call the PM is project manager. They manage on the timeline, manage for the client's requirements. They don't think about, their own problem solving, to achieve the product goals. So that's the reason that we don't have that kind of talents. We have a long history of IT, but they are just IT. And another issue is in Hong Kong, we barely have, very successful large tech giants, from the very beginning. Because these days we have seen a few, Klook, Lalamove, Google X, they nurture a bunch of good product person, but still, compared to market demands, a tip of iceberg. And the reason that, people, they even want to move to Singapore, product person, I understand, a lot of good product person, they like to go to Singapore because I think, I don't know when, maybe Crystal can tell more. It's the big tech company from the West, they really want to set up the development center in Singapore. I mean, like Google, Facebook, even Facebook, the number of people in Hong Kong is actually more than Singapore, but that product center is in Singapore in Asia. I don't know the reason, but maybe because of the fundamental supply reason, because in Hong Kong, we don't have that kind of product person and don't have that kind of software engineer, because in Hong Kong, they call them programmer before. Nowadays, we have more software engineers. So the concept was different. The culture is different, maybe.
Curious to hear, Crystal. I think you have great experience in both places. We'd love to hear from you.
From Hong Kong too. Yeah, so I mean, for me, I grew up in both Singapore and Hong Kong, so I totally understand what's happening on both sides. And I think it boils down to pipeline, actually. So for example, I think in Singapore, the government actually does a lot in terms of university engagement, in terms of preparing the future graduates for what's the new future of work. We have very, very weird modules in what I call it. Yeah, there's one called VUCA. It's like volatile, uncertain environment. There's a module just on that, and it's a staple. Everyone has to take that. So it's like we actually do, and then we do have a compulsory internship module that they'll partner with all these big tech companies, which is why I think that's why there's a lot more in the pipeline for the graduates before they actually come out and do all these different things. From Hong Kong, I don't see that much of a pipeline. Maybe that's one of the reasons. But I think back to your question on how solve this problem, I think to a certain extent, actually, it's also apart from things that you cannot control, like let's say what the government policies are, I think internally you have to make a lot of changes as well, like for a founder, maybe to be very open-minded, or for employees underneath, to kind of drive that change and say, hey, I think we need to do this. I think we need to do that. I want this kind of person. How can we make the ecosystem better? How can we make this job more desirable? Or how can we, it's all about listening to lots of different types of people, listening to your employees or listening to your founder, and then also to, learn from other hubs. I think that's kind of like what we do. Back to your as well as the trust that we have in employers, employees.
Yeah, thank you for the response. I think that's very helpful to understand the context in Singapore and Hong Kong. Yeah, really appreciate all the questions. I think that's very, very insightful questions, and we got a lot of interesting conversation here. To wrap up the discussion, I would like to ask each panelist final questions. For all the things that we talk about today, I'm just curious, which part of the discussion is more interesting to you, or actually change or reinforce some of the ideas about remote working? Maybe anyone want to volunteer first? Yeah, you're the guy.
Shut the question to me again, Derek, just so I know how much.
Yeah, which part of the discussion today is more interesting to you, or change how you see on remote working?
I think it's been people's attitudes towards being able to allow people to remote work and not just offer the technology to be able to do it, but businesses changing to allow remote working and not just offshoring, remote working in Hong Kong. You know, Lewis, when you said when you launched Second Startup in 2018, that was when I arrived in Hong Kong, and I was working with a lot of startups then. It was predominantly who I worked with, and even then, most startups were you're in the office 5 days a week. And that was a challenge. And so I think startups have obviously the mindset has changed, but also enterprise businesses have changed. And that's where you see real progression when the bigger corporates start doing it. And that's been, I think, something which has really opened eyes from my point of view, hearing how your businesses have been doing it, how you've been adapting, not just the hardware and the technology, but the culture of the business has to change and how your communication has to change towards enabling remote working and not making it like an elephant in the room.
Well, for me, I think it's what I kind of like took back as like being present. I think what you mentioned just now on like having a facility in Batam, I think that reminded me of something, because like back then in Singapore, I actually had my own startup, and I did go on a trip to Batam to see that big thing that you guys built there. I think that and the trust that you have with like, hey, we're doing this, they're kind of like remote offshore, but then we have all of them together. I think that's having a hub is very important. I think that's kind of like what we're thinking as well, because currently our developers in Taiwan, they're in Taipei as well as Kaohsiung. So that's like kind of two different places, but how do we foster the sense of belonging with them? How do we make them feel like, hey, they're all part of SleekFlow, like the whole Taiwanese team is SleekFlow Taiwan, and they're also part of SleekFlow like global. How do we make them feel this way? I think that's a kind of like an issue that we've been thinking about with a hub work, with bringing them, flying them over help for like maybe a 1 to 2 week kind of thing. Yeah. So I think a lot of these things is building on what you mentioned about trust. You know, it's about trust in like, hey, I believe the company is doing something, and trust in like, hey, I believe you can do something. I believe you can contribute. So I think it's making them feel that we trust them and like letting them trust us to, you know, that kind of like relationship that we need to build. I think that's what I learned from today. Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of the topics are really, really interesting today. And I think, you know, we learn from each other a lot. I think to me, I think, you know, we talk about a lot of like talent crunch, you know, this is the reality, you know, this is the challenge we're facing. I think just don't avoid it, you know, and just face it and take that as a challenge, right? So I think, you know, as the, you know, the market change, the trend changes, like what we can do is to react faster, right? And build a right strategy, you know, with by trial and error, you know, very fast, and then test it fast. And what I think is like, I agree really much, you know, from Crystal's, you know, for the, you know, remote workers, like we have to accept that we need to build a team remotely. And the trust issue is something, you know, it's a two-way, you know, right? You don't expect them to trust you before you trust him. So for our company strategy, we build a remote team. We don't see them as an offshore team, or we don't see them as a outsource center. Actually, every employee we hire remotely, they have been through the same interview process, and then they have the same company, you know, onboarding. And then we will ship them, you know, the onboarding kit, and they have the right to have a one-on-one with our founder, CEO, COO, and every functional team lead. And that's the, you know, I think the trust building. And then you don't see them as just an offshore outsourced worker, and that will help your company, like, you know, really scale and, you know, be performed in the market.
Yeah, definitely, I mean, it's very important to understand that how employers have changed their mindset. And the trust is also that, like, is remote worker only a low quality worker? If that is the mindset, then maybe employers will have a lot of problems. Thank you very much for coming today. I do want to thank for WeWork. Like I said, for and working this event is very important, and most importantly, we like to have you as the audience. So, as a token of gratitude, let's give a warm welcome to WeWork and Maya Adela. Thank you very much for that. And as a token of gratitude, Glint would like to offer this still hiring free sponsor Glint. If you're interested in learning more about how to hire people remotely, your first payment will be free. We don't charge anything. So if you're interested in that, please use the QR code to claim that, or you can also check your email inbox later on this event. I would like to pass the time back to Jonathan.
Thank you. Let's give one more clap to all the guest speakers today. I'm sure you have so much inspiration for tonight, and feel free to approach them in person in the later networking sessions. We still have a lot of wine and food. Please finish them. And as the organizer, as WeWork, we would like to also express our gratitude to all the guest speakers. So we have prepared some gifts for you guys. So I want to invite our area lead in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Wookie Choi, to give out all the gifts to our guest speaker.
Actually, the reason why we prepared this gift is actually I heard Jeremy use WeWork before. Yeah, but he moved on to another location. And then I noticed Crystal, Lewis, and Derek is not yet WeWork members. Yeah. So for here, unofficially to bribe them, we have prepared a little souvenir for you guys to take the WeWork with you. So you're always welcome. And whoever is here today, as Joyce have mentioned, we actually bribe you guys to come. But actually, we wanted you guys to, yeah. Actually, we really want you guys to come and be part of our community and actually try the one-day experience with us. So as we mentioned, we will share the day pass with you. So feel free to join whatever location you want to go, and then enjoy the view and enjoy the great vibe with our team. And hope to see you soon. Yeah. So take the WeWork with you. Thank you. Thank you, Derek. Thank you. Yeah, Jeremy, you're welcome. You can come back. Yes. Yes. All right.
So also, as we mentioned before, we have a lucky draw. Yay! So Jeff from our seller, he has very kindly to prepare two wine for us. So I will do the draw right now. So show your name, maybe. The first lucky participant is Joey. You here? No. Sorry, Joey. Bye, Joey. The next one is, so we have two bottles, right? Okay, cool. Jack Chan from SleekFlow. Jeff, can you come and present your gift? Jeff is from my seller. Take a picture. Okay, one last chance. I guess you guys, it's the time to shout your name, okay? Okay. All right, this person didn't have a name card. Just 1 minute. Sam from, I can't read your word, Sam. Woohoo! Thank you for all your being here with us tonight. So as I mentioned, we still have a lot of food and drinks. Enjoy the rest of the night and feel free to network around. And if you have more questions for our guest speakers, approach them in person and enjoy the night. Thank you so much. Thank you. What is this? What it is?
Oh, thanks, Joyce. Yeah,
Pad-
partners. Yeah.
Pattern and partners. Sorry, I didn't get that. Enjoy the
You got the name right.
Yes, Sam. Cheers.